99% of authors, when they put a book together, they have, a goal or several goals in mind. What would you like to see happen now that this evidence has come out into the open now through your books?
Well, I mean, the actual book is calling for a public inquiry, an investigation, open investigation into what led up to the crash and what went on at the actual crash scene.
So you'd like a kind of staged or televised thing that all the members of the public could actually watch as it was going on?
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of the key players involved in what we're saying was an assassination.
There's so much of this evidence is discredited and dismissed as conspiracy theory. That nice, neat little phrase that they've made up and thrown out through the media into the public domain: conspiracy theory or conspiracy theorist. And there's a lot of evidence there that's just not being looked at. It certainly hasn't been, given a fair crack of the whip. There's a lot of questions still unanswered, and there's a lot of evidence to suggest that Diana was assassinated.
So I think the people have got a right to an inquiry. And during the research and writing of the book, we came across, a huge number of people. I mean, I would say, I can't put a percentage on it, but a large number of people know in the back of their minds that it just wasn't a straightforward accident. Something went on in Paris that night, which needs to be investigated properly. I think he's been treated unfairly, regardless of what I think about him as a person. I've never met him, so I can't comment. But I think we have tried to interview him on a couple of occasions, but he wouldn't see us, unfortunately. But regardless of what anybody might think of him as a person, he has been treated rather unfairly.
I think so.
And you do have to ask why.
Yes.
What kind of threat does he pose, or is it because of the fact that he's an Arab Muslim?
Yes.
Is there some kind of racist agenda going on, which is racist, going on here?
Well, you mean that, these ancient European, Germanic kind of royal bloodlines, they are, shall we say, suspicious of the Islamic royal bloodlines?
Unquestionably, yeah.
And Diana, again, don't want to reiterate what we already talked about, but Diana actually going out with an Arab Muslim, an Egyptian Muslim, sorry.
Yes.
Is an up yours to the establishment, big time. I'm not saying that. I mean, I believe she did have feelings. She was seeing a doctor who was a Muslim before she, from Pakistan, I believe, before she took up with Dodi. But obviously, it's gonna roll the establishment. The fact that he's an Arab Muslim, it doesn't make him any different to any other human being, for a start. Yeah.
Yes.
But it's something that it is made something out of by the establishment, because he's an Arab Muslim. Again, we go back to these ancient old battles. The Crusades, the 1300-year-old war against the Christians and Muslims, which in some corners is still being fought.
Yes.
Which just create big problems, and ultimately, it was one of the reasons that led to Diana's death.
Well, lots and lots of people, they all know about the relationship between Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles. Now, what makes that relationship rather untasteful to the British public, or large numbers of the British public, is that, Charles married Diana. He continued to see her, according to Diana, this is, when she appeared on the BBC's Panorama programme. She actually made the statement there were 3 people in the marriage, and the third person that she was referring to was Camilla Parker Bowles. Now, what is really interesting is that a book was published, written by a gentleman called Noel Botham, who did some research into Camilla Parker Bowles, and he found that the man that Camilla Parker Bowles had married, Andrew Parker Bowles, he served in the British military as a guards officer, and before marrying Camilla, he had had an affair with Prince Charles's sister, Princess Anne. And when you look at the history of royalty around the world, you come across this phenomenon of concubines, sexual mistresses, and the jack in the knave that you get in a deck of cards is a sort of symbolic representation of a young sort of stag that a queen might keep in her closet and use for extramarital affairs. And all royal families throughout history have had concubines. They've had secret lovers stashed away, and they've kept those relationships going for many years. And it's really fascinating because an ancestor of Camilla Parker Bowles, by the name of Ms. Keppel, actually had an affair as a mistress with one of Prince Charles's ancestors. So, what we could surmise from this situation is that the Parker Bowles were one of these families that served the royal monarchy's need for extramarital affairs. Well, Diana's about 4 or 5 years older than I am, and I was still at school in 1981 when the engagement was announced, and I remember looking at Diana and thinking, wow, what a fantastic looking girl. Now, Prince Charles had, about 10 years previous to this, he'd been chased around by young ladies on beaches, and it become a little bit of a sort of unofficial sport amongst young girls to kiss him, because he was one of the world's most eligible bachelors. But time went on, and he had affairs with both of Diana's sisters before eventually proposing to Diana. And basically I thought that it was a bit of a mismatch, because Diana was only slightly older than I was, and she was a teenager, and Prince Charles was, let's face it, almost middle-aged. And in the Andrew Morton book, Diana, Her True Story, it clearly says that Diana was intimidated by the age of the circle of friends of Prince Charles. I mean, she was a teenager, and all of a sudden she was catapulted into public life, being hounded by the media, burst into tears on a few occasions, and she'd left her family home. And Prince Charles's friends were in their 30s, they were in their 40s, they were in their 50s. And believe it or not, some of them were in their 60s and 70s. In actual fact, one of the friends of Prince Charles is Lawrence Vanderpost, who's written lots of interesting books, and he's very, very interested in paranormal. And he's done various expeditions to the Kalahari and was an acquaintance of Carl Jung. Now, if you can imagine a young girl, a teenager, which was what Diana was, she'd worked as a nanny in a kindergarten, in a nursery in London, all of a sudden being surrounded by royalty, talking about expeditions to the Kalahari Desert, and not really having any contact anymore with anybody of teenage years. Now, a lot of relationships, it's quite common to have a man who's approaching his 40s, or he's in his early 40s, and his wife is in her 20s, and I think that can work. But in this situation, with Charles having really a very, very serious love affair with Camilla Parker Bowles that hadn't been fully extinguished by the time that he married the teenage Diana. It was a recipe for disaster. And it's interesting that some of the TV news reports lied about Prince Charles's age. In actual fact, if you have the birth dates correct, Prince Charles in 1981, when the engagement was announced, he wasn't far off from being double Diana's age. Now, the morning, the very, very sad morning where the world learnt that Diana had died, had been killed in this car accident. What happened is that the royal family were at Balmoral, and amazingly, rather than travelling to Paris with their father to see their mother and to pay their last respects to their mother, the young princes were forced to follow royal protocol and continue to the church for the normal church service which had been planned as normal at Balmoral. And of course that meant that the princes were being dragged in front of the world's media, literally just a few hours after Diana had been killed. I thought that this was extremely callous, and I thought that, okay, it's normal that the princes would attend church, but this was an exceptional case. Now, you would think, wouldn't you, that the service would say prayers for Diana, but there were no prayers said for Diana, none at all. In the Stephen Frears film, The Queen, there is a scene where it's quite clear that the Queen didn't request that the service be changed whatsoever. And I feel so deeply for the young princes. That morning they had to hide their suffering at the loss of their beautiful, enigmatic mother in front of the world's media, being chauffeur-driven from Balmoral to the chapel. Within just a few hours of the news of Diana's death, people started arriving at Balmoral and laying flowers, and they started arriving at Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace. And it was obvious from the very beginning that the public really thought that the most fitting end to all of this was a state funeral for Diana. The Queen refused Prince Charles the use of a royal jet. Now, we know this because Prince Charles's staff actually rang around normal commercial airlines trying to find a flight for him, and he was going to be booked onto a flight that would go from, I believe, Manchester to Paris, or via Manchester to Paris. The Queen thought that the best option was to stay at Balmoral, and no statement was made by the royal family, and the flag